I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today my guest is Henry Shukman, who is the resident teacher, Zen Master at the Mountain Cloud Zen Center here in Santa Fe. Welcome aboard, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So today's prophetic topic is, ordinary mind is the way. This phrase comes from the Gateless Gate by the Japanese Zen teacher Momon, which means no gate. Koan 19. The complete koan reads as follows. Joshu earnestly asked Nansen, "What is the way?" Nansen answered, "The ordinary mind is the way." Joshu asked, "Should I direct myself toward it or not?" Nansen said, "If you try to turn toward it, you go against it. If I do not try to turn toward it, how can I know when it's the way?" And Nansen answered, "The way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament. How can it be talked about on a level of right or wrong?" At these words, Joshu was suddenly enlightened. So, we'll get to what this is all, how this is all going to tie in. Before we even do that, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you become a Zen master?
When I was about 12 years old, I remember getting concerned about something a little unusual maybe for a 12-year-old, I don't know, which was, am I awake or not? I didn't, not in the sense of like, was all this experience of life a dream? But simply in the sense of like, how awake should a human being be? I mean, when I'm in this waking state, I'm walking down the street, you know, I'd noticed, for example, that I might be kicking a stone along the pavement, the sidewalk on my way to school, and suddenly, you know, I'd have got from one lamppost to the next lamppost without even noticing. How did I get from there to here and not realize that I was doing that? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I started wondering, well, wow, am I fully awake? Even when I'm, you know, seems like I am awake, am I actually fully awake? And how could I ever know? Who would be able to tell me? I mean, could somebody get inside my head? No. And read out, you know, what's going on here? Is this maximum wakefulness or not? And I realized basically that there didn't seem to be a way of knowing that. And it kind of bothered me. And I would try to be awake, you know, fully awake. And then I, you know, basically, you know, I kind of was, you know, busy with the usual things that a teenager would get busy with in the years after that. And then suddenly when I was 19 years old, I got a kind of answer to that preoccupation, which just hit me out of nowhere. I was stone cold sober, of course. I was a young guy, you know, I wasn't interested in drugs or anything. And I was watching the sunlight on an ocean as the sun was setting, just staring at this sunlight. I happened to be on my own, and all of a sudden, the scene that was before my eyes was suddenly not before my eyes. It was part of me, or I was part of it. There simply was no separation between the one who was looking and what he was looking at. And that experience hit me very hard. Like, it was astonishing to me.
Did you, or in retrospect, see this as karmic destiny?
I don't know what it is. All I know is that basically, fundamentally, this whole universe is incredibly benevolent. It may not always seem it, but and we certainly make a great big mess of it in many ways. But fundamentally, this whole system of existence is incredibly benevolent. And so I think it just wants to draw us to its heart, you know, and it did then. Somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I was able to, in that moment, let go of who I thought I was and discover a whole different level of being and existing that was totally beyond time and place, actually.
Were you at all familiar with Buddhism, Zen Buddhism at the time?
Zero. I had no idea. I'll tell you, actually, the one thing I'd seen was, I don't know whether you know, you're a fan of J.D. Salinger, but one of his books, I liked him when I was a teenager a lot. I mean, I still do like him, but I started reading him as a teenager, and one of his books has this little epigraph. What is the sound of one hand? And then underneath it said, a Zen Koan. I kind of liked that. I didn't know what on earth it meant, but I liked it. And I don't know, basically, no, I knew nothing about Buddhism whatsoever. And so it was a problem, actually, because this incredible beauty just sort of dropped into my life out of the blue that was totally unlike anything else, and it had an authority. That's the great thing, you know. It's like I just knew this was somehow the truth. This was how things really were. And it felt, actually, I remember at the time feeling like my purpose is fulfilled. I came here to find this fact, and I found it. And I really, even though I may only have been 19, I remember feeling, I can die happy now. Truly. But actually, it didn't end there. You know,
Obviously not. You're here now.
Yeah, well, that's another story.
Okay.
We don't need to get into that now. But actually, you know, it was problematic for me. It became problematic over the years because I just wanted nothing but to sort of live from that place, and I couldn't. I didn't know how to get back to it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. And I didn't know where to turn for help. And, you know, if I had happened to, I don't know, read some Catholic mystic or a Sufi prophet or something, maybe I'd have gone that way. But what happened was maybe 9 years later, I happened to come across some words of Dogen, who's a great Japanese 13th century Zen master, and his words were completely unintelligible to me. But something in me knew, definitely, that he was talking about what I had seen that moment on the beach. He was talking from the same world. And that was it. I just went and got myself trained in Zazen, actually right here in Santa Fe, way back then, and I never looked back.
Who'd you train with here?
A beautiful Zen priest who was called Robert Winsome, who sadly died actually a few years later. Wow. As a young man. I mean, he was in his mid-40s or so.
That's incredible. I mean, that's why, I mean, it just has that complete and total feel of karma. You know, I know nobody else has had this experience unless they were on drugs.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know, to just at that age, there's more to life.
Well, you know what? I actually, when I eventually found my own true sort of Zen teacher, as opposed to there's a number of teachers I'm very grateful to who I went to and got trained in and this and that, but somehow, you know, it just didn't happen that I felt right about becoming their student, and that was difficult as well. But eventually, I meet this guy in my hometown in Oxford, England, John Gaynor, a great, great Zen teacher, and he'd had an experience so similar,
of course,
when he was a teenager.
Yeah, it had to be.
It's funny how that works. That's the majesty and beauty and, well,
the synchronicity.
The synchronicity.
Yes.
And it's ordinary. You know, in a way, it's ordinary too. As Nansen says in this koan, ordinary mind.
So let's start getting into this. A little bit of history on Zen.
Zen means meditation, and it identifies itself as a special stream of Buddhism that started with Shakyamuni Buddha in India and has been passed down for something like now 86, 87 generations, from Shakyamuni all the way to today, through India first, then through China, and then through Japan. And now it's here in the West.
This was the gentleman who got fed up with straight Buddhism, renounced himself, and went off to China, is it not?
You're talking about Dogen?
No,
No.
The start of Zen.
The start of Zen, the start of Zen in Orthodox Zen, the Orthodox Zen view is it starts with Shakyamuni Buddha, with his great awakening at the age of 29, or whatever, according to whichever scholar you may read now. At some point, anyway, Shakyamuni Buddha had this great experience of awakening when he saw the morning star in the east, Venus, after sitting for 6 days straight under the tree. You know, suddenly he just woke up. He tried the life of materialism, consumerism, all the wine, women, and song and luxuries. That didn't work. So then he tried a life of extreme self-denial and asceticism. That didn't work. So then he took nourishment because he was emaciated and about to die, you know, and sat down under the tree and said, I'm not getting up till I have resolved this great question. Who am I? What is life and what is death? And he just said, I'm not getting up till it's become clear. And on that morning, when he saw the star, all of a sudden, he just found his true self. We could put it that way.
Yeah, what I was actually referring to was there was a lineage from Buddha that was ended. I forget the gentleman's name.
You're talking about Bodhidharma?
Yeah, and he just got, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not what it's supposed to be. And he left India and went to, my understanding was what he founded was basically the Shaolin Temple.
That's right, that's Bodhidharma.
Yeah.
I don't know the part that he was kind of fed up with Buddhism, because he had a teacher himself called Prajnatara, who interestingly, they now think was probably a woman, although she's always been identified as a male master. And she instructed him something like, you know, in a certain number of years' time, you're going to go east to China. This is all happening in India. You're going to go east to China, and you're going to take this teaching with you. So the teaching was, just to come back to that, it basically, Zen says it's a special transmission outside Scripture. You don't need to do scriptural study in Zen. You may do a bit, but you don't need to. It's about directly pointing to the human mind and becoming a Buddha, finding out that this ordinary mind of each one of us is actually Buddha mind.
And now, okay, I mean, that's, again, I don't want to get too deep into this, but my understanding was the move to India was to break the lineage because they were drifting, and Zen was an attempt to go back to the original teachings of Buddha.
Zen has always tried to go back to the original experience of Buddha. See, we think that we're passing on the very mind of Shakyamuni Buddha generation to generation, teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student, and all the way down. It did that through 28 generations in India, and then, I forget now, like 23 generations in China, and then it went off to Japan and has been doing that there too, and now it's come here. So it's about the actual experience being passed on, not the, you know, the written teachings.
Yeah, just the actual experience, the meditation, and just a straight focus.
The straight focus that can then lead us to a radical discovery about the nature of who we are and what all this is.
So part of that journey is the 3 fruits of Zen. You want to talk about that?
Okay, I'll just briefly touch on that. But we say there are 3 fruits of Zen. The first is developing steady, clear, balanced concentration. Now, the concentration here means not just like you can hold your focus on something. It's more like getting centered, getting grounded, coming together, being present, rather than scattered and distracted. You know, and that, of course, takes time for all of us, because we live in a culture that's partly, in a way, built on distraction. You know, always looking for the next thing that'll make me feel better. You know, whereas in this kind of training, we just get to be here, and whatever storms are going on inside us, we just kind of let them rage until they pass, rather than trying to distract ourselves with another drink or with another TV show or with a text. We're kind of here. So that's the first fruit. The second fruit is once we've got a good sort of lens developed that can hold steadily and focused on an object, we turn it inwards. Who am I? What am I? What is all this? We start really studying our experience, and that can lead to an experience that we call Kensho, which literally means something like seeing nature, translated as seeing reality. That would be fine. That would be a moment of revelation.
So let me try to put this in a different context, which hopefully is similar.
Mm-hmm.
We start with kind of not giving into the chatter. Then we go to not allowing the body to distract us and not giving into the chatter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we learn how to hold it.
Something like that, yes. I mean, the chatter is one of the main elements of internal experience that we can get caught up in and that will sort of take us away from being present.
Is there a particular technique for Zen that we do a focus, we do a mantra, we do... What is that thing, item, or whatever you want to call it, that allows us to start to clear all that other stuff out?
Breath.
So we follow
just
the breathing.
We sit with the breath. Zen's got a kind of radical simplicity about it. It just wants to take the human mind and body, put them down, be still, watch yourself. So just watch your breathing.
So you watch your breath. Is there a particular form of breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth? Does it matter?
Doesn't really matter. We do one thing that we'll try to sort of encourage people to do, if possible, is to breathe into the belly, the deep belly. Now, that some people find that really hard, and it doesn't matter. But if you can, it kind of helps to get more centered. And
you follow it in, and you follow it out, and then follow it back in again, and follow it out again.
That's right. That's right. And we very often start with a count. It makes it easier to keep the attention on it. We have a simple count. We count
to
like
6? Or?
Count to 10.
10, okay.
Count to 10. And you can either do that like inhale, exhale is 1, 2, and then next inhale 3, next exhale 4, up to 10, or we just count every exhale. And when we can hold it, when we can get to 10 fairly regularly, we might then forget the count and just in and out.
We're going to get sidetracked here, but that's okay. I know a lot of people who meditate, and they're not sure what is the experience. What is the experience? Is it emptiness? Is it light? Is it...
What do you mean the experience? What do you mean by... Do you mean like when I was talking about that second fruit?
When we get to that place where we start to empty, what does that feel like? What does that look like?
Well, as we start...
So somebody can know what,
Yeah. Well, there's two things here. One is what we call samadhi, which is getting more absorbed, more concentrated. And what that... You know when that's happening because it feels great. Basically, the chatter dies down. The flickering images inside the mind also die down. And things get still. We get more peaceful. And then we can get these little or long periods when it's just quiet. It's just amazingly quiet. And it's a funny thing. We could say, you're more empty at a time like that. And yet it's very fulfilling. That when we have a quiet state like that, it's deeply fulfilling. So you can kind of recognize it that way. But this is still on what we'd call the first fruit of Zen. It's still in that zone.
It's interesting because my experience had been initially, I would get to a place what I would consider emptiness or clearness, and I get so startled by it, I'm there. And as soon as I'm not there anymore.
Right.
So how would you suggest to people watching the show, how do they deal with that initial encounter?
Right. Well, I mean, certainly to have a regular practice that's supported by what we call a sangha, namely another group of meditators, a group of meditators, fellow meditators, is incredibly important. It's so, so helpful. So I'd say come on up to the center and join us, because it supports us in so many ways, one of which can be all these kinds of glitches that can happen in our practice, which are very common. So that self-awareness that you just mentioned is sort of like the mind kicking back in.
Yeah, that all of a sudden there's an emptiness and you recognize the emptiness. Yeah. And all of a sudden, as soon as you recognize it, it's not empty anymore.
Well, also because it can seem like it's not separate from us. If we're really in there, it's not separate from who we are. And the moment we see it, once again, we're separated. Mm-hmm. If you see what I mean. Yeah. Which truly we're not, actually. It's an illusion that we're separate.
Well, we got to basically meditate through the illusion to realize it's an illusion.
That's right. Not by fighting it, by just allowing it.
Yes.
It's always just allowing is the way. This is partly what Nansen was trying to convey to Joshu in that koan we heard. Don't turn towards it. If you turn towards it, you go against it. Just be. Whatever is going on is the way. So if you try to set up the way as something else that you've got to get to, you're already steering away from it.
We can go far afield here.
Okay.
I'm trying not to, but two quick questions which are going to take us far afield. You talk about group meditation. My experience has been, and just address it in either way or shape or form, group meditation has its own power to it because of the group. I think that's why every theology, every spiritual practice is group-centered.
Right.
But does that not then really connect us to something that is us but not us, outside of us? Doesn't that make it harder to go back into individual meditation and find that place when you've been powered, so to speak, by the group?
You know, it's a great question. Fundamentally, we're just not separate. The individual identity is, in a sense, an illusion. So when we get that, the sort of dynamo happening of a group sitting together, yes, it's a step towards loosening our attachment to our own sense of identity, definitely. Now, actually, though, everything is really our community. I mean, in a way, that's what I discovered in that moment I was talking about, that I just wasn't separate from even the ocean and the sand and the sky and all time and all space. So I think part of the value of the group is like giving us a doorway into a discovery of that on the level just of the group, if you see what I mean. But another is actually just like, of course we're not alone, And the more brotherhood and sisterhood we're in, the better.
So you're saying it's more desirable for group meditation than individual meditation?
Well, fundamentally, we'll probably end up doing both. But to know that the individual meditation is basically never individual, even though it may apparently look that way, actually it's never individual. And that's an incredible thing to know, and then to start to know more deeply to the point where we can encounter what we call the third fruit of Zen, which is where we're actually living it. Every moment of the day, we're training to live it all the time.
And recognize the oneness in whatever we encounter.
Yes, and well, I don't know how far we want to go into this, but the oneness has a sort of deeper level underpinning it, kind of thing, which is what we call emptiness.
Now let's really jump.
Okay.
He uses it. What's his name? Nansen, and you've used the term the way. that is a Taoist term. Is there a direct or indirect connection between Taoism and Zen Buddhism? Because Taoism was Chinese, Zen Buddhism went to China. Has there been a blending of the two?
That's basically what Zen is a blending of Taoism and Buddhism.
Because that'll bring us to the next. In Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, there's always the picture of Lao Tzu, which really just translates into old master riding an ox,
Right.
leaving the city. And what we want to try to get through, and hopefully, we got about a half hour, so we might be able to do this. There's a process of Zen training called the 10 ox herding pictures. You want to talk about that? And we were looking to talk about some similarities, especially with 12-step, but we may or may not get there. But let's really get into the 10 ox herding pictures, what they are all about.
Yeah, okay. So the 10 ox herding
Did I say
pictures.
12? Yeah, I probably did.
Actually, there's another version where there's 8, but the most standard version is 10 ox herding pictures. They're basically a set of drawings with little poems to each one that map out the journey of a Zen training from beginning to end, kind of thing. That's roughly what they do. And they were written first in the 9th century, so the 800s. And there are, like I said, there's 4 or 5 different versions of them, but there's one that's become the main accepted version. So they are a kind of map of what happens in a Zen training. Now we could, shall I just kind of like briefly outline?
Take them one at a time. We could talk about them. We'll get as far as we get.
Okay.
That's why they now have Wikipedia.
Right. So ox herding picture number 1 is called Looking for the Ox, or In Search of the Ox. Now this is where somehow we recognize that the way we've been living, somehow there's more to life than we've been sort of allowing there to be, in a sense, in our experience. And we start looking. You know, some people turn to philosophy, some people turn to religion. This, of course, may be triggered by, probably usually is triggered by suffering of some kind. It could be a great loss, or it could be a terrible diagnosis, or something else.
Or just a deep-seated belief we don't belong.
To find out if we do belong.
But we start with the belief we don't.
Do you mean don't belong in the culture that we're living in, or in this world, or what?
All of the above, the body we are occupying.
Right.
Because, I mean, again, we talked about, we had this amazing conversation over breakfast. We should have taped it, recorded it. But the first step is about trying to fill that void because we don't know how else to fill it. So whatever 12-step program somebody is part of, it's about what I'm doing now ain't working.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
I'm able to recognize that.
Well,
and not only that, but I'm able to recognize that somehow I've got to turn and find help somehow.
And we start in the 12 steps by admitting that what we've done doesn't work, and if we keep going back to it, we're going to keep getting the same wrong answers and the same bad experiences that we've had. And if we need them, I guess we need them. But if we can come to that understanding, you know, the phrase I like is, I cannot have any successful encounter with any mood or mind-altering substance. It's not going to work.
Right, right,
You
right.
know?
Well, the Zen equivalent might be, you know, my materialist approach is never going to satisfy the hunger that I feel inside. And I want to do something about it.
And can it also be on a deeper level? If I keep listening to this, I got a problem?
Absolutely. I have been guided by this mental chatter.
Yes.
And that's no longer working. Well, I can see now that it hasn't been working for me. This spiritual yearning, or yearning for something else, something more, is never going to be fulfilled as long as I just follow the dictates of my own mind.
I keep chasing the bull.
Yeah, right. Well, I've got to find the bull. Actually, this is the recognition that there is something to find and it's worth finding.
Okay. Then that leads us right into number 2.
Yeah, finding the traces of the ox, or the footprints of the ox. So this is great, because this is when you realize, there's a path. There is a path. There's a path to follow. Others have been this way before. That's the kind of, that's when you get plugged into a system. Whether it's 12-step or Zen training or Christianity or whatever way it's going to be, it's like finding that, yes, there's a practice I can follow that's going to take me the right way.
The bull is what we desire, not what we're running from.
The bull, yeah, exactly. The bull is finding our true self, who we really are.
So the bull represents in this series, whenever we mention the bull, it is our greatest understanding of self, of the oneness.
It is. That's exactly right. I mean, we call it, I guess, awakening.
Yeah.
But you see, it's a long journey. It's not enough just to see it, as we're going to find out.
So in the context, and again, the similarities, the second step is coming to believe that something greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Wow, that's exactly the same, really. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that these footprints that we are discovering is that little bit of understanding there's actually something out there that can get me out of this mess that I've created and I've been in.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's good. That's remarkable. So then we get the third step, which is when we actually see the ox. Now we'll only see part of it. We'll only get a glimpse of it. But it confirms, wow, it's really there. Now the experience that I was talking about when I was 19, I believe would be an example of that. That's what we call kensho, a sudden moment of total revelation. But
so the earlier experience would fall into 1 and 2 pictures.
The earlier experience I had would be picture number 3, catching a glimpse of the ox.
That's the one at 19. But you had this feeling years before.
Oh, I see.
So that would have fallen into the combination of 1 and 2.
I guess that's right. I'm a little mixed up, because I then fell way back to being totally lost. Even after I'd had this glimpse of the ox at the age of 19, if you see what I mean. And I had to
but the seeds were planted.
They were. That's exactly right.
Let's back this up for a second.
Okay.
Why the bull? Why the ox? What was the symbology of that? Why was that chosen? Why wasn't a duck or a geese
yeah.
Buddha,
Yeah.
Why do you have any idea why they...
I'm sorry to say I don't know.
Okay, we'll strike that question.
Okay. I don't know, why was Lao Tzu sitting on an ox himself?
Well, up until this conversation we had, I always thought that was a means of transportation. That the old man is going to get on the ox and is going to ride out of the city and say goodbye to everybody, and
right.
But he's always been, presented as the, on the ox. So
yes.
There's something that must be deep in there that this ox has some kind of representation. Maybe it's even in Chinese astrology. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with it.
I'm really sorry that I can't answer that question. I feel I should be able to, and I can't.
Well, we'll put you on the spot. You're going to be back in a while, and you'll answer the question then.
I will. I hope I will. I'll try to.
Okay, number 4.
Okay, so you've seen the ox, but actually you've only seen it. You haven't got hold of it. It's not like you can live it. It's like, this is what we call kensho, is a glimpse. You get this sudden revelation, and so, wow, now I know there's this other dimension that is real, and it's kind of marvelous. Sometimes actually people find it shocking, but if they have a teacher and a group, they'll be okay. They can.
I can understand how that can get spooky if you're having your own experience with nobody around, nobody facilitating it, nobody guiding it.
That's right.
I've had I've had a couple of experiences. One of them was in that spooky nature because all of a sudden something else was there. The other one was, let's say, instigated by a master. So that was a little bit different.
Right.
But it was about meeting that void.
Right.
I mean, it was like, oh my God.
Exactly.
I had no idea how long, where I was, how long I was there, how I got there, when am I coming back.
Right. Well, you know, Chogyam Trungpa, he said, one glimpse of shunyata, which means emptiness, one glimpse of emptiness is so horrifying that compassion naturally arises. And then another time he said, one glimpse of shunyata is so marvelous that compassion naturally arises.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So this picture, number 4, catching the bull or grasping the ox, it's sometimes translated, that's when it's no longer just a glimpse, but actually it refers to a deeper kind of experience that we call Dai-go. And that will generally, I mean, it's very, it's not like it comes on cue or anything, but it usually takes quite a long process of training before that's likely to occur.
And the training always loops back to the meditation.
It does, it does.
So the meditation reinforces the stages of our advancement. So we start to, if we meet the bull, so to speak, walking down the street, and it may spook us, then we go back to our meditations.
We go back to our meditation and our Sangha, our fellow, brothers and sisters, to our teacher who's there to guide us, and he's or she has seen it before. It's okay. They can hold our hand.
Exactly.
I know this is totally unfamiliar territory, and it seems wild and groundless and crazy, compared to the world that we have created for ourselves previously. But it's okay. There is a path, and we just keep going down it with the teacher's guidance and with the guidance of all these masters who've gone before us.
And to go back to the 12 steps here, because the third step is making that decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of this belief that we come up in the second step, that we are not going to be following the same path anymore, that there's another path, there's something there that cares about us,
right,
that embraces us, that we can be one with.
Right, beautiful.
And then from that point on in the steps, for the bulk from 4 to 9, this is just my interpretation, this isn't the official interpretation of anybody. It teaches us what that means to turn it over and get that guidance.
Right.
How do we demonstrate that we are surrendering that self-will, that ego? What does that look like?
So then will that culminate in some taste of really meeting this kind of other...
The 12th step is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps.
Right.
And we actually have the spiritual awakening in the 11th step, was when we seek out that divine guidance specifically.
Right.
It's the only instruction, I believe, that's ever given in the steps. Is the 11th step. We saw it through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God, praying for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. That's the only thing we need to know. What is the will for us? What is our path? What is our journey? And basically, I believe the power to carry it out is the momentum that got us there seeking it. I wouldn't be seeking it if I didn't believe it worked.
Right. So when there's this, what you're terming like a spiritual awakening, do you think that sounds similar to the kind of thing we're talking about in Zen?
Seeing the oneness.
Right.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. That's how we got this show started. To me, it definitely is that oneness.
Right.
Because in the context, and the only difference between, for me, Zen and 12-step is the audience they're trying to meet. I think Zen is geared something a little more functional than 12 steps, which really goes to people who are severely dysfunctional. I mean, I was a drug addict for 26 years.
Right.
Nothing that resembled functionality.
But in another sense, I guess, what society would call functional maybe it's not dysfunctional in the sense that, being a drug addict for decades is, but at the same time, from a bigger perspective, how functional is it really if it's just not taking us to, any kind of fulfillment, any kind of love, any kind of...
Well, that's it. When we could see the big picture, that's exactly it. Then we see there's a purpose and reason for that experience.
Exactly. Do you know what I'm thinking is that we do it's somehow a little bit the other way around. Like, we're talking about this awakening moment in the third picture, and then the fourth picture is like a big gap, really, between the third and the fourth. Hopefully having a deeper kind of awakening in that fourth picture. But then, taming the bull, riding the bull, it's like there's a few more steps to get, that are like your steps 4 to 10 or whatever, where you're learning how to actually live with this and live it and be guided by it.
And that's all 4 and 10 is right. What is that guidance? When you right. leave that third step, what is divine will for us? Because that gets repeated in the 11th, but it leaves us, we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Our will is the power behind our actions. Our life is the result of those actions. What's guiding it?
Yes. So I wonder if we end up at a similar place.
Oneness.
Yes, but you see, in Zen, it's like we want to see that and know that intimately and then get really grounded in it until we completely forget about it. You see, this one, number 7, is the bull transcended. Once home, the bull is forgotten. Discipline's whip is idle stillness. It's like, actually the picture is a little guy sitting outside his hut with no trace of the bull. He's just sitting there on his own, like normal, ordinary, So a lot of these masters talk about you've got to have this experience, and then you've got to wash it away. So, in other words, the goal, if there is such a thing, is living without that kind of intentionality of getting anywhere. Just here, just as it is.
The intentionality is the oneness.
Right. Well, I'd say that's part 1 for us. That's like to find that and know it. And then part 2 is to forget about it and be it.
Yes.
And you can't really be it if you haven't forgotten about it, kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? Like, as long as there's some idea of oneness or emptiness, then we're not actually...
And that becomes the intention. Why am I doing what I'm doing? If there's an intention behind it, then I am, in context of what I see as 12 steps, we are being driven by the ego.
Right.
If I'm just doing it because it flows naturally,
right, then
I become closer to that oneness.
That's right, exactly. Well, in fact, inseparable from it. Not closer to it, right? So that it is functioning through me. I'm just the glove.
We're one and the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So and then what tends to arise in people quite naturally in this sort of stage is wanting to help.
And that's the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs.
Ah, right. Beautiful.
Carrying it back out into society, being the demonstration of the oneness.
Exactly. Look at this. Return to society, the
Yes.
10th ox herding picture.
Yes.
Crowded marketplace. Actually, I think the full phrase is something like, I return with gift-bestowing hands. Like, all I want to do is help.
We keep what we have by giving it away.
Yes.
If we get
That's right.
caught up in, look at me, how great I am, I'm not giving it away. I'm feeding my ego, and I'm still back into the disease, and I got to go back and revisit the process and see where I lost track.
Exactly. And that will happen. This process is an ongoing training.
It's ongoing training. It's a lifestyle. I mean, to
right.
me,
that's right. Well,
it's a lifestyle, just like Zen is a lifestyle.
Right. That's why we call it a path.
Yeah.
Actually, or a way.
The way.
The way. The way is not something you attain, even though we sometimes talk about attaining the way. Actually, it's just something you do, you are, you exist as.
The way that can be defined is not the way. The way that can be labeled is not the way. The opening phrase is kind of, not exactly quoted directly, but that's the basic opening phrase, is the Tao Te Ching.
Exactly. Well, it's like Nansen was saying, if you know it, it's not it.
It's not it, exactly.
And if you try to go towards it, you go against it.
And that's why in the steps, and again, this is just me, the third step and the 11th step talk God as we understood God. It's always the past tense. I can't understand God.
Right.
The minute I do that, I've eliminated God.
Oh, well, that's beautiful. So God has to be
based on the belief I have in the second step. So
Right.
it's always in the past tense that I take these actions based upon a belief and a continuity
I once had or something.
I've seen that if I follow this belief structure and allow it to guide me, life gets better.
Right.
But it's never the full understanding. It's always the understood.
That's very interesting. That's just like us when I was talking about, like, you got to wash it away.
Yeah.
Good.
We're going to start to run down on time. Let's make a couple of announcements. Then let's get back to, we started talking before we got on camera about the 4 Nirvanic meditations and how they tie into the ox pictures. But you had some announcements you wanted to make.
Oh, yeah. Let me just, if I may, just let everybody know that Mountain Cloud Zen Center is a really beautiful old zendo. It was actually the first purpose-built zendo in the Western United States. There were earlier zendos, but they weren't built to be zendos. They were converted into zendos, whereas this one was actually built out of adobe, lovingly built by a group of students of a teacher called Philip Kaplow back in the early to mid-1980s. Absolutely beautiful place, and it's been very sort of quiet and underused because, unfortunately, the teacher who built it had to leave shortly after it was constructed. And although a few teachers have come now and then, it hasn't had a consistent teacher there. It does now, and it's me. I mean,
good.
And it's hopefully I'm good enough. I don't know. We'll see. But the center's being reborn. It's very exciting. People are coming, and we've got vegetables growing now. We're taking care of the place, and it's really coming back to life. So I'd like to, let everybody who might be interested know we're there, and we have an introduction to Zen every Wednesday, 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, just an hour, and it's a really lovely group forming actually who are learning the basics of the practice. You can join at any time.
And you're the teacher.
I'm teaching that. Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful.
I'm training somebody who will take it over one day, but for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be teaching that.
Way cool. And
oh, sorry.
Go for it.
Add Thursday nights. We have our main weekly sit, which includes a talk, what we call a Te show, where I'll talk usually about one of these koans, which is another matter.
That's our next show.
That's our next show on the koan. But and then Sunday morning we also have a sit 9 till 10:30, followed by tea and chat, socializing, whatever. It's a lovely place. It's a lovely group of people, and I would hope that people will feel really, comfortable about coming along and finding what kind of a welcome they will have.
And they can reach you at the email and the website that we've been flashing on the screen while you've been talking.
Well, thank you for doing that. That's correct. mountaincloud.org.
Mm-hmm. Is there a phone number you might want to give out?
There's a phone number on the website.
Okay, so they can get there on the website and they can call.
Yeah. They can call and, either speak to somebody or leave a message and we'll get back to you.
And there's no reservations needed. There's no capacity. So, if half of Santa Fe shows up because they've seen this show.
That's fine. We'll make room for everybody.
I love it. Excellent. Yeah. Any other announcements that?
I don't know. I mean, you'll see on the web that we have on the website, we have other stuff going on all the time. But nothing that I think, needs to be announced here and now.
Okay, good. I got a couple announcements, then we'll get back and finish up. Just want to let you know, I haven't said this in a while. It needs to be said. This is public access television, and you, the folks watching, are the public. So we are here for you. You're not here for us. Want to hear from you. What comments you may have on this show or any show, you could contact me. I have all my contact information flashing on the screen. There's an email, there's a phone number. They'll be both scrolling at the end of the show if you want to stay that long to watch the ending. It's nice. It's got a beautiful graphic on it. You can get my contact information. Also, if there's a show you'd like me to do, let me know. If there's a subject you'd like to have more done on that maybe it's been done. Maybe you want Henry and I to talk more about these 10 ox pictures and the 12 steps. Maybe there's something else. We are going to do a show come a couple of months down the road because of scheduling. We're going to do a part 2 of this show that we've just done on koans, what they are and how do we use them. That's why we opened the show with a koan. But again, want to hear from you. Let me know what it is you'd like to hear, what it is you'd like to have discussed. Also, just to let you know, I am a spiritual counselor. I believe that without a spiritual component, we do not heal. You know, Einstein once said the problems of the world cannot be solved with the same thinking that created them. And I firmly believe that applies to the micro just as much as it does to the macro. We cannot solve the problems in our life with the same thinking that created those problems. But we do have connection to a higher guidance, whether that way is Zen, whether that way is 12-step, it does not matter. I believe that eventually they all take you to that same place, and my job as a spiritual counselor is to guide you to that place within the constraints of your own belief structure. So if that sounds like it might be interesting, contact me. We can talk. My services are on donation basis. So if money is an issue, it's not an issue. I have, you know, it's divine providence that takes care of me. It's not any one of you individually. So don't put obstacles. You know, our brain will tell us this is going to work for us. Therefore, we got to sabotage it. Don't let it be sabotaged. If you get the feeling it's going to work, contact me and we'll find out if it can work. I think that's the end of my announcements. Did I forget anything?
Well, I just thought of something I might mention myself,
Go ahead.
if I may. That I also do dream work, archetypal dream work. And it's very compatible with a meditation practice, the way that I work with dreams. I believe that dreams are helping us all the time if we only listen to them.
How does that tie into Zen?
Well, it's a long story. Maybe that's for the next show. It's about how we sit with them.
We got about 5 or 6 minutes. You want to try it?
Yeah, okay. Dreams are giving us information all the time about who we really are and about where we're stuck and what our wounds are that we're not addressing, and they want to lead us through a process of healing. And that process is greatly accelerated if we have a meditation practice, because we already have some groundedness and enough stillness that we can kind of let the dreams do their alchemical work in us. Something like that.
We were going to talk of, let's see if we can do this quickly. My learning of nirvana, which is a term for the blowing out of all attachments, as Buddha experienced it, there were 4 stages of meditation. Each one of them were actually stimulated by taunting by Mara, which is kind of like the mischief god, so to speak. And I believe that was really the ego. Right. But let's skip the first 2. The third meditation was consciousness in the depths of unconsciousness. So if you're talking about dream work, it's about following that path of dreams to get to that place of consciousness in the depths of unconsciousness. Right, receiving. It's going to guide us to that place. Exactly, because we don't normally sort of receive our unconsciousness. You know, we don't know how to let it take over. If we were receiving it, it would be unconsciousness. That's right, that's right, that's right. But actually, fundamentally, that we all share it, and that's where the oneness is, and that's what we want to be able to surrender to. So this becomes Jung's collective unconscious. I think so. And if I may just jump back to the first 2, they're all about separation. The first one is being separate, and the second, there's still separation in it. I forget actually what the second one is right now. You talking about the ox?
The second nirvanic meditation.
Oh, the second one is the free from thought wave, unitive state.
Okay, so then separation has dissolved, and there's an apprehension of our union with all. And then the third one, consciousness in the depth of unconsciousness. And what's the fourth one?
Beyond thought, the realm of complete purity.
Right, that's what we would call prajna, before knowing. It's like the state when the knowing has been dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And that would include knowing things like oneness and emptiness. Just no knowing.
And all of these are just guiding us to a place of total, complete detachment from self and attachment to or connection to the oneness.
That's right. That's right. Something like that.
We've got about 2.5 minutes. You got a parting thought?
Surrender. It's always about surrender.
Yes, that's all the 12 steps. Each one of the 12 steps is a different action in the surrender of ego.
Right. You know that phrase, start where you are? Well, to do that always involves surrender to where we are.
Yes.
Time and again. And as long as we do that, it's okay. Because then we unfreeze.
As long as we don't buy into the illusion of what that voice is telling us we should be or what we think we are.
Exactly. In other words, that we should be somewhere other than where we are.
Exactly. I'm not here. This isn't
Phil,
right.
where are we?
Yes. No, and that's it. And, surrender is the perfect word. Surrender and acceptance.
Right, and they go together. And then
Yes.
surrender and trust are two sides of one coin as well.
Yes.
And that's all we need to do, really, in this crazy existence of ours.
You make it so simple.
We make it so complicated.
Exactly. Perfect answer. Henry, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have you back in a little while. We'll talk about Koans and get into this a little bit further.
Well, thank you very much indeed for having me.
It's my pleasure.
And for inviting me back. It's very kind of you.
This will be one of many.
Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in. The message is the same. I've been doing these shows now almost 5 years. And we've covered almost every possible theology that walks the planet. They all teach you the same thing. Unity, oneness, connect to it through getting rid of your ego by surrendering to the oneness. Give it a shot. Stop looking for the differences with people. Look at the similarities. Let me get a little biblical and out of context here. But Jesus, I thought, said it really nicely. I am in the Father and the Father is in me. What does that mean? Take a sponge and put it in water. You are in the water is in you. It's oneness. So until next week, love and light, blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.